Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. Yes, it's me. Monty's having a well-earned rest, so I've got you for a whole hour and I'm looking forward to it. What a season it's been so far. I mean, the weather has been here, there and everywhere, but the garden is really doing well. I think it's the first year I'm becoming satisfied with certain parts of it, and the dry garden is one of those. And look what's going on at the moment, the poppies at the front there. They're one of the things we inherited when we first moved into the garden. So I just let them seed, do their thing, and then just edit them where I don't want them. But then you look at the stars at the moment, for me, is the eryngiums. They just look like they're marching their way through the border, absolutely covered in bees and hoverflies. I found a little poppy, a little orange one, which is very different to the others. And I had some down the bottom end of the garden, and for some reason one seeded up here. But it's the first year where I've got round to collecting the seeds, so all I'm doing is ultimately picking a dry day, and where these seed heads are just starting to brown, they're sort of dry, and you can more or less sort of just about hear them like salt in a pot, and the seeds in there. And I'm just collecting them use a brown paper bag, or I'm using an envelope, and then what I'll do is I'll sow those in compost, and hopefully then I can place exactly where I want them around the garden. On today's programme, Francis meets renowned ecologist Dave Goulson, who's dedicated his life to the conservation of insects and inviting as many as possible into his own garden.
We know that actually globally insects are in decline. 75% drop in flying insect numbers over the last 26 years.
Toby Buckland is at home in Devon with some gardening first aid.
Now this is a Pittosporum Tom Thumb. It should be like an evergreen tuffet, a perfect dome, but it's fixable.
And I'll be making some changes to my meadow. So, we're going to do a little experiment. I think in reality for me, that's what gardening is, just one huge experiment. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But we take you back to sort of February time. This part of the garden was underwater, some of it up to a foot. The thing that never ceases to amaze me is the way that nature reacts. There's things here, like the cardoon, that I thought would have just rotted away and never be seen again. Absolutely thriving. Other things have been hit and miss. If you look at that sedum in the front there, some of it did really well, but further back along the border, just disappeared. But what's done really well in this space is all the things that would naturally self-seed. The borrages, the poppies, the verbenas. So I'm going to add a selection of self-seeding plants, which I hope will replicate the success of the others. Plants like Alchemilla mollis, a perennial foxglove, and a short-lived geranium. They'll add height, texture and colour around the quince tree. Don't rush it, place them, go in, sleep on it, come back out and check it in the morning. But I think that's looking all right. So, let's get them in. So the first one, Geranium palmatum, and it is a bit of a gamble. I'd have probably grown it in a pot and put it in a sheltered position through the winter. But I want to give it a go because if it self-seeds and it does it well, it's an amazing plant. What I am going to do, because of the time of year, is just give everything a really good soaking. So, put some manure in, work that in a little bit. That'll help hold that moisture in. But that's quite free draining. There's some gravel in there. If you are going to plant this plant, don't be too tidy with it. And what I mean by that is don't go trimming off any of these lower leaves. If you have to, maybe only about halfway down, because what you'll find is because it grows from quite a tight root system, it gets quite tall quite quickly and can rock, and then it really won't like that. So what those leaves do, and the stems, they work as like a little support system. It'll now get up to about 1 metre, lovely sort of rich pink flower against that beautiful sort of palmate leaf. Fantastic. So, next, Digitalis lutea, which is a foxglove. You're probably looking at it and going, actually, Frosty, where's all the flower? Where's all the flower? And in reality, yeah, plant doesn't look the best, but look at all the seeds I've got. Incredible amount of seeds. And the flower, I've just got a few there. Just a few. Digitalis lutea bears slender spikes of pale yellow flowers. It is longer lived than most and thrives in sun or shade. All I might do, actually, later on, is just put a couple of canes in and just tie it in, just to help support it through the next few weeks. So, let's get the Alchemilla mollis in. Good go-to get out of jail plant. This is not too bad. These were just plants that I lifted from the garden last year, so that's not in bad condition. And even if they get a bit rough and ready around the edges, you could cut that hard back to the ground, and in reality, it would come back, no problem at all. So all I'll do now is probably put a little bit of mulch around each one of the plants individually, just to help get them through the summer months. I'm not going to put it everywhere else, because when they seed, I want seeds to make good contact with the soil, and I don't want to impede that in any way. I think, for me, you know, this experiment is a little bit bigger than just putting in a few plants and seeing what will survive. It's how we garden going forward. How do we deal with those huge changes in weather? But also, how do we create our gardens with wildlife in mind and live in balance? And Francis was lucky enough to go and meet a man that I think is an inspiration.
Even on a blustery day, this garden is very busy. There are bees buzzing, butterflies flying all over, and creepy crawlies scurrying through the grass. It's because this garden is the garden of Dave Goulson, a professor of biological science, an author, and an all-round expert on bees.
His mission is to attract as many different insects to his garden as possible, to try and help offset the alarming drop in their numbers as a whole.
So Dave, tell me about the state of insects in this country.
They're not doing so well, sadly. We know that actually globally insects are in decline. There's a really alarming study from Germany that came out a couple of years ago, which showed a 75% drop in flying insect numbers over the last 26 years. We should be worried, you know, particularly bees being in decline, because they're vitally important as pollinators of our crops and our flowers and so on. But, you know, it doesn't have to carry on. We can stop it, we can turn it around. And it actually, because insects, they can breed really quickly, they will come back. Not many have gone extinct yet. And if we just provide them with some food and somewhere to live, they'll recover in no time.
Us gardeners really are the key to that recovery. There's more than 22 million gardens in the UK, and insects can thrive in even the tiniest of outdoor spaces.
I have a perhaps slightly fanciful dream of them all being bee-friendly, wildlife-friendly. Gardens can be fantastic places for insects. There's potential to have literally thousands of species of insect living in your back garden.
Well, can you talk me through some of the things that gardeners can do to actively help the lives of insects?
The most obvious thing really is don't spray pesticides in your garden. There's no point in, you can't have an insect-friendly garden if it's full of poison. So skip the pesticides, really simple thing, and plant lots of insect-friendly flowers, and insects will appear as if by magic. It's amazing. Just, you know, one lavender bush in a pot on a balcony, and somehow the bees will sniff it out.
Dave's approach is to use a lot of normal herbaceous garden plants, along with natives or British wildflowers and their close relations.
So talk me through what plants are here and what they're doing for the insects.
So we've got basically a mix intended to attract and feed as many different insects as possible. The non-natives include things like the giant hyssop there, which is fantastic for bees, and catmint and lavender, which are all, I mean, of course, classic kind of bee plants, and they're beautiful, and, you know, I couldn't live with the garden without them, to be honest. But I've also got lots of natives, and I think there are lots of things to be said for growing native flowers. So marjoram is a great one for attracting a range of insects. There's honeybees, I can see a green bottle, there's various hoverflies on there, and if it weren't quite so windy, there'd be butterflies on there.
But he's also filled a pot with bird's foot trefoil, a plant normally found in meadows, because it's a favourite for breeding insects as well as hungry ones.
It attracts lots of bees, it flowers for ages and ages, and also, because it's native, it's the food plant of the caterpillars of the common blue butterfly and the burnet moth, both of them gorgeous insects to attract into the garden. So, you know, why would you plant pelargoniums in a pot when you could have beautiful bird's foot trefoil?
I have to say, I've never seen it in a pot, and it does look amazing. Do like pelargoniums as well, though.
The key is having a combination. Plants that work for insects, plants that work for us, and lots that we're both keen on. And once the insect numbers rise, it brings even more joy, as Dave proves in his veg patch.
Let's go and have a look at the vegetables.
This is all looking very lush and healthy.
Yeah, it's looking good this year. I'm pleased. I try and grow enough food to feed the whole family. Admittedly, the kids are fussy and refuse to eat half the things that I grow, but...
Of course.
Amongst the very lovely vegetables, Dave has left some veg flowers to grow from last year's crop for all sorts of insects.
So this giant beast it's a parsnip. Most people think of a parsnip as the rooty bit, but I just left 2 in the ground last year, didn't harvest them. And of course they flower in their second year, they're biennials. And that means I can collect the seed. In a few weeks' time they'll be ready to harvest. So it saves me buying parsnip seed every year.
Yeah.
But aside from giving you seeds, there's a dual advantage of the parsnip because it's really prone to blackfly.
Yeah,
you can see there they are.
see.
But also, if you look closely, up there is a little cluster of ladybird eggs. The flowers attract hoverflies,
Yeah.
some of which have larvae that eat aphids. So between the ladybirds and the hoverflies and the soldier beetles and the earwigs and all sorts of other predators that are attracted in by the aphids and then will help to keep their population under control so they never become too common and they never spread onto my runner beans over there, which you can see are completely free of
all your
pests.
veg-
And I haven't sprayed any chemicals at all. I'm just relying on these insects to come to my aid.
There's leek flowers and comfrey here too, to attract more insect predators that will pollinate his veg while they're at it.
It's all about balance, about giving nature a chance to do its own thing and not trying to control everything all the time.
Sometimes nature knows better than we do, perhaps.
I think she does.
Having water in the garden supports a huge number of aquatic insects. But probably the easiest thing that we can all do to help involves the lawn.
I always feel slightly stupid doing this. I don't know why. I've done it thousands of times.
It's graceful.
This old lawn is mowed just once a year. And lots of insects have moved in.
So let's have a look what we've got in here. Look at this.
Oh, wow.
It's just kind of alive with little moths. So this is a green shield bug, a fully grown one. These are rather handsome. Here we have a swollen-thighed flower beetle. It's fairly obvious why it's called a swollen-thighed flower beetle, because it has these...
Thunder thighs.
Yeah, it's like the Chris Hoy of the beetle world. This is a lacewing. These are beautiful insects, a lovely kind of lime green colour, and the larvae are voracious aphid predators. They have these big curved scimitar kind of jaws. They stab into the aphids and suck the juice out of them and then leave this kind of shriveled husk behind.
Nice.
Yeah, lovely.
For something so beautiful.
The insect world is charming.
All these insects are here because of the longer grass.
If this was mown like a traditional lawn, you'd have almost none of this insect life. Because
Yeah.
every time you mow, you go through, not only do you get rid of all the vegetation, but you actually suck up and macerate all the poor insects. In long grass, if you leave it, you get all sorts of stuff. Plus the seeds then provide food for birds later in the year and voles, and there's a whole kind of ecosystem springs into life
Absolutely.
just by stopping mowing your lawn.
Even leaving a little patch at the end of your garden would do. So actually, gardening for insects is really easy.
It involves stepping back, stopping mowing the lawn, stopping spraying pesticides, and giving things a chance to recover. By doing a little bit less, us gardeners can do so much more to turn the tide on declining insects.
Just trying to get that done. The weather just about changing. I can listen to Dave talk about gardens and wildlife all day long, but I know most of us are not just going to walk away from our lawns and let them go to meadows. But what about this as a compromise? Over the last couple of years, I've been playing with how much we do and don't cut the lawn. And we've got to a stage now where I'm only cutting once every 4 weeks. And you can see the lower wildflower is starting to establish itself. We've got things like buttercups, the clover. There's self-healing here. And this is what Dave was growing in a pot. So if I pick one of these, yeah. So this is bird's foot trefoil, which Dave was talking about. But also, what I love about wildflower is the different names it gets. Bacon and eggs, that's quite obvious. But also the other one, Granny's toenails. What do you think of that, Ash? Granny's toenails. I'm not sure my old gran would have been too over-impressed with that. Oh, you like that? Yeah? We haven't all got big lawns. I do understand that as well. But even if you leave the close, you know, the smallest space, it's amazing the wildlife that will come in and use it. Even on a damp day like today, we've got things like the hoverflies and the bees are out here doing their work. Anyway, me and my parrot better get on. Come on, you. Now we've got the first of your home videos, and it's from a young lady from Surrey who does love a cut flower.
Hello, my name's Poppy, and today I'm going to be talking about sweet peas. My favourite sweet pea is called Piggy Sue. I love it because it's a mixture of a whitey pink and then it's got dark pink on the edges here. To keep your sweet peas healthy, you need to pinch off the twirly bits, and I call them pesky twiners. They take all the energy for them, not the actual flowers. So you just need to get your 2 thumbs and pinch it off. You're supposed to pinch these bits off every time you see one. The more you pick your sweet peas, the more sweet peas you get. Some of these have long stems. If they have a short stem, a bit like that, you need to pick the actual strong stem, and then you can put them in vases. All these sweet peas smell amazing, especially this one. But this one doesn't really smell of much. You might have better noses than me.
Poppy, I thought that was really beautiful. But you've just made me realise I grow my sweet peas for my 2 daughters and my wife, but none of them come out and help me with those annoying little tendrils. They don't. So maybe you could come and help me one day. This is the wildflower meadow that I created, a couple of years ago now, and you know what, I'm absolutely loving it. I can feel I come in here with a cup of tea and my heart rate just sort of seems to drop and everything becomes calmer. I love the way that it's evolving and changing. I go back 12 months ago, the oxeye daisies were all over and you looked like they were just going to run riot. And this year, the wild carrot is really coming to the fore, but it will keep evolving and changing over the years. And what I'm starting to do now is just come in and do a little bit of editing. And what I mean by that is just things that I get a little bit worried about that might take over. I'm just keeping them at bay, really. And here I've got the spear thistle, which I tend to leave those at the moment because the flowers are being well used, but also there's some creeping thistle down here. And what I've been doing is just coming out, cutting the top off that thistle. What I'm going to do is just clear off that grasses so I can see, and then just take the little bulb planter and then just put it on the top and working that down, trying to get the root out. There you go. That comes out. And that just leaves me with a hole. So I've got rid of the thistle. And then I've slowly been adding, well, to be fair, various different wild flowers that I've been growing from seed. I grow them on. I grow them in, 9-centimetre pots. And then I've just been plug planting them through the meadows. And I'm doing it, I suppose, to add diversity. And diversity for wildlife. And this common teasel's been added for one reason. There's a tree up there that's got one dead branch on it. And every day we've had a goldfinch coming out, singing its heart out. And I think it's more or less saying, Adam, please can you add something to your meadow that I can go and enjoy. So this teasel is for that goldfinch. So all I do next is just ease the roots a bit on the teasel and just work it into the hole. And all I do is just give that a little bit of watering in. And because they're biennials, what they'll do is they'll slowly seed about. But it does mean this winter I'll have some very happy goldfinches. Now we've got another chance to catch up with one of Carol's garden visits. This time she's gone off to Darley Park in Derby, which has got one of the largest hydrangea collections in the country.
Hydrangeas tend to have this musty, old-fashioned image. We can all remember them from our childhood. Great shrubs outside people's front doors or around the back of the house. But in recent years, there's been an enormous resurgence of interest in them, and no wonder. They're such beautiful shrubs, and it's not like we've got all we're going to get, because constantly there are new hybrids being introduced, new excitements to look forward to. This is the most familiar kind of hydrangea. We call them mop heads. No wonder, with these great spheres of flower. They're one half of a group called macrophyllars. Where I come from, in Devon, they call them changeables, and that's because these colours change all the time according to the sort of soil they're growing in. This one is really pink, truly pink. In fact, you'll find most of the mop heads here are pink. The soil here is on the alkaline side. It's only when you get acid conditions prevailing that you get truly blue flowers. But whatever colour they are, they're utterly gorgeous. The other half of the macrophylla family are these lace caps. Around the edge of each flower head is this big circle of sterile flowers. Nothing going on here, but they're like flags that wave and bring in the insects. And this is what they bring them into, an absolute myriad of tiny, tiny little flowers. For some unknown reason, they're not as popular as mop heads, and yet I think that they're so elegant, so graceful, and these flowers are absolutely exquisite. Well, this is hydrangea arborescens Annabelle. Isn't she magnificent? This is a North American species. What it does is make new shoots under the ground, and eventually this could cover this entire area. It actually needs restricting. That means that when you come to prune it, you can prune it really hard. You can do it in late autumn or early spring, and it'll burst into growth. Now, most of them are white and have these huge heads, but there are occasional ones which are pink. One of the hydrangeas that us gardeners are learning to love more and more is this. It's Hydrangea paniculata. It's an Asian species, and it gets its name because of these panicles, these sort of cones of flower. It's an incredibly elegant sort of plant. That's because lots and lots of the flowers are tiny, and then above them all are these gorgeous sterile flowers. So the plant is very, very visible, and yet at the same time it's open and airy. But not all Hydrangea paniculatas have this same form. In some cultivars, this panicle is composed totally of sterile flowers, so they're much more voluminous. Cultivation for these, as for all hydrangeas, is very, very similar. What they like is moist soil, but even if you've got dryish soil, incorporate loads and loads of organic matter. Water frequently, especially when just planting. And as far as pruning is concerned with these, again, they flower on new wood, so you can prune them really, really hard. And that way, they'll produce loads and loads of strong stems with enormous panicles of flower. It's difficult to choose a favourite hydrangea, but over the years, there are a few of them that I've come to really love. Hydrangea macrophylla Lady in Red is certainly out of the ordinary, with its cherry red sterile flowers with unusually pointed ends. Hydrangea serrata is a whole separate species. It has bright blue flowers which fade through lilac and then deepen again. And the whole bush is just so dainty, so pretty. I really want one in my garden. I've fallen for Hydrangea macrophylla salsa. Not only are its deep pink flowers edged in crimson, but its foliage is dark and dramatic too. Hydrangeas have to be the best value shrubs in the garden. They work so hard and give of their best for such a long period of time, from the summer way into the late autumn. There's absolutely no excuse for anybody not to have a hydrangea in their garden.
I've got to share something with you now, which is very personal to me. I think I've got a bit of an obsession, with hydrangeas. Partly because of that diversity of where they can grow, their flower types, their foliages, their stems. They really can bring something to every garden. So this is Hydrangea paniculata, little lime. The flowers are lime green to begin with, fading to white, and then pink in the autumn. And what's lovely about this is it won't get too big. We'll go about 1 metre, 1.2 metres, something like this. But what I do love about this type is the fact that they flower, on the new growth, which means you can cut it quite hard back, and because it flowers on those tips, I'm never going to lose a season's growth. But when it comes to prepping, make sure, especially in my clay soil, that they go in a square hole. And I know that might sound a bit strange. The reason being is that there's quite a lot of clay in my soil, and if I dig just a round hole, and I don't make it too big, all I'm doing is digging myself a slightly sort of bigger pot, which means the roots will go round and they'll keep growing round in circles. If I dig a square hole, ultimately those roots are going to get to a corner and then they'll really start to break out and establish that plant in the ground. Hole's about twice the size of the pot. This will go well in sun, it'll go well in semi-shade. And because of the size of it, it would work well in a container, you know, on a pot. But what I am doing as well this time of year, because, you know, of our weather and not having a lot of rain, is putting an extra bit of organic matter into the hole. And that organic matter here is just manure, but you might have your own compost or even buy some manure, you know, from the garden centre. Let's just see what this root system's like on this pot. Actually, it's not bad at all. What you don't want, you know, when you take a shrub out, if the roots are going round and round and it's pot bound. So I've just loosened those up and then just put that in the hole. Make sure that it's just slightly proud of finish level. Start to work the soil back in. And all I've got to do now is give that a good drop of water. So, just going to get that right down in the roots. I would take the rose off this watering can and just soak it that way, but I can't actually get the rose off the watering can. So once that's had a really good drenching, but I'm going to do one little last thing, add a little bit more mulch. This is just something that I do this time of year, really. It's really going to help hold that moisture in around that plant. And so there you go. All I've got to do now, really, keep that nice and moist over the summer, and it will keep flowering, flowering and flowering. Still to come on today's programme, there's another chance to learn about Charles Downing's no-dig approach to growing when we visit his garden in Somerset. And I'll be planting some leeks that hopefully will be fantastic for Christmas. But first we catch up with Toby at his home in Devon, where he's sharing some old school tricks that us gardeners pick up over the years.
Well, summer's here, the garden's buzzing. I just love the energy at this time, and there's still more to come. And this year, I have to say, we spent so much time in the garden with the family. It's been wonderful, for the most part. For my kids, this garden is a leisure centre, their dojo. They play all sorts of ball games here and cause all sorts of damage. Now this is a Pittosporum Tom Thumb. It should be like an evergreen tuffet, a perfect dome. But you can see what's happened here. A basketball has been slam dunked into the centre, and now it has, well, what's best described as an unfashionably wide parting. But it's fixable with a bit of string and a knot that my old dad taught me. It's called a trucker's hitch. You get the string, you fold it in half, and then you just tie a simple knot in it to give you a loop. Now the loop is the genius of this, because when you're using soft twine, if you run that through the branches just halfway up from the compost, underneath any that are splayed and broken, put the end through the loop, and you see, as I tighten, just gently, all the stems get pulled back up into the centre of the plant. And like broken bones, after a while, they'll set in their new position and the plant will look as good as new until the basketball comes out again. But tying up with string isn't the only way to get plants to grow in the direction you want. You see this lemon tree? It's a bit bare on one side. That's because at the start of lockdown, I moved it from my greenhouse and put it into a container. And where the stems sat at the back of the greenhouse against the wall, well, they're bare. But there is life, and I can tell that because they are dormant buds. Now, the reason why they're dormant is all to do with the top of the plant. You see, as plants grow, the buds on the very top dominate the ones below. It's a botanical term called apical dominance. They send down hormones that keeps the lower buds asleep. because this is where it wants to grow, up into the sunshine. But you can wake up those buds and stop these hormones coming down with this clever little trick called notching. And all you do is get a sharp knife and then run 2 cuts just above the bud you want to grow. You take out that little valley there, so you can see the green. Now what that does is it blocks the hormones coming down to the bud, suppressing it, while still allowing all the goodness to come up from the roots. So with a fair wind, this bud will break and I'll get a branch exactly where I want it. It doesn't just work on fruit trees. My Acer is coming back to life after a very tough time under another shrub, thanks to this notching technique. One thing I have noticed with the family spending more time in the garden is how the taller members of the Buckland clan are catching their heads on this branch. Now, admittedly, this birch tree, it is planted right next to the garden path, and as the summer growth really gets going, this is going to bend down and become even more in the way. Now, notching is a technique to get buds to grow where you want them. There's another technique called nicking that will inhibit the growth of a branch like this. Now, it's the same thing, really, but instead of cutting above the bud, or the branch in this case, I'm going to put a little slither below it. Now that maintains the buds and the apical dominance from the top of the tree, but hinders the goodness coming up from the roots, which really does put the mockers on this branch altogether. It just keeps it the same. So a little nick like that makes all the difference. It can stop branches like these growing into the fence, branches like this one growing across the path. One family-proof plant I'm very fond of is the hardy cranesbill. They're tough, so survive the cut and thrust of the borders, but can get hidden by taller neighbours. So I'm going to shift a couple, as I have an important job for them in another part of the garden. Now this, right by the edge of the lawn, might seem an unlikely place to put a cranesbill geranium, but I'll show you why it's so good in a minute. Now, before I get them in the ground, this seems counterintuitive, but if I was to leave these leaves and flowers on this plant, sure as anything, it would just wilt and die off from the top. So I'm going to give it a kickstart with a good prune, because cutting down the tops encourages the roots to spread. You get new growth, the plant gets a grip on Mother Earth so much better if you do that. Now, at this time of year, when moving any plant, absolute key is a good soaking in. Now, the reason why I like cranesbills around the edge of my lawn is because not only can you see them and celebrate their lovely flowers, they are so robust and they save me a job that I don't like doing. See, I'm quite tall, and edging shears, I don't know, they make me stoop over, and it's the one gardening job that gives me a bad back. And by growing my cranesbills around the edge of the grass, they sort of burgeon and flop over the lawn, and I don't need to keep the edge nice and trim. Of course, if the grass does come up, this is the robustness of cranesbills for you. I can just go over the lot with a mower and they'll bounce back with lots of flowers, but no grass amongst them. And if the kids are out here playing football, well, so what? The cranesbills are tough enough to survive. One flower you wouldn't put on your team where ball games are concerned are gladioli. But I love the way their delicate spikes of colour last right through till the autumn. And it's not too late to plant the corms. What I do is when they arrive, I put them into multi-purpose compost, get them straight out of the plastic bags because they sweat inside those. And in this dry compost, but basically they don't shoot, but they do, you can see, produce roots, which means they're ready to rocket away as soon as they're in the ground. There's all sorts of different techniques for planting them, but I ignore the packets and what it says on them and stick them in nice and deep, good 6 inches down. That's because when they're growing well, their foliage is like a great big spinnaker. It's like a sail that will rock around in the breeze. And if you plant them deep, they're anchored and then they don't need staking. Put them in 2s, 3s and 5s, somewhere where it's easy to water. They like a bit of moisture when they're growing. And 90 days after they've gone into the ground, the first flowers will be showing. So this will be lighting up my garden right at the back end of the year like a last hurrah of summer.
Lovely to see Toby. I haven't seen the old boy for ages. I would have caught up with him, you know, at the shows. But I also love those little tips that we pick up as gardeners, you know, as we move forward. And interesting to know where Toby learned them from. And this is a prime example of something that I learned as a youngster. We came out the other day and the trees with the wind were wrapping around, and you can see it's really laden with fruit. And I was getting a bit scared that something was going to snap. If I pick these branches up, they feel heavy, which makes the tree very vulnerable. I'm thinning them out for that exactly, to sort of take that weight out of the tree. But also, if I leave all those apples, yeah, they'll look lovely, but they won't really form into a fantastic crop of good-sized apples. So the reason I'm doing it, leaving them really in pairs. I said pairs of apples, not pears, all right? Before you say anything to me. I'm leaving them in pairs and then they'll form into a decent crop, you know? And that's the reason you do it. I think sometimes it feels overcomplicated when you pick up a book and you look at fruit and pruning fruit. In reality, when it comes to sort of standard fruit, most of that formative pruning normally goes on through the winter months. But, you know, instead of trying to get your head around all this and that and whatever, what you're really looking to do is create an open goblet shape. And I've always got in the back of my head, the old gardener's been able to throw a cap up through the middle and it comes back down. You know you've pruned it well. And that is one of the wonderful things about gardening is, you know, everybody's always got a wise word, but there are so many different ways to garden. And we've got another chance to catch up with Charles Dowding, who's got a really fascinating approach to veg gardening.
What has always interested me the most is the link between soil health, plant health, and people health. And so that's why I started being organic. And then that health idea also developed into no dig. No dig is about not disturbing the soil. And this allows soil life, of which there is plenty in there all the time, to proliferate. And if we feed that soil life with organic mulches on top, soil life comes up looking for food, and you get a hive of activity in the soil, which can then work with plant roots to make nutrients and moisture available. When soil is dug, cultivated, rotivated, the matrix of structure is broken. With no dig, the structure is firm, it's not disturbed, but you actually get better drainage because you've left the beautiful matrix of holes made by soil life, and water can percolate as well as roots going through that matrix structure to bring water up again. Digging sometimes to me feels a bit like ripping off the clothes, you know, it's a bit aggressive. And I think then soil thinks, I'm not sure I like this. And it wants to recover. Recover means getting over what's happened, but also literally in soil's case, recover with weeds. It gives you incredible benefits going on through the season. And I find I'm doing less weeding. And it's one of the reasons I can run a quarter-acre market garden and be very productive. There's really very little weeding to do. The undisturbed soil with its compost mulch stays clean. I never set out to change anything much, really, but actually what I didn't like was the way a lot of chemicals were being used to grow food. And so I was looking at how to grow more healthy food, healthy for the environment and healthy for people. During the 80s, with every year that passed, organic became a little bit more acceptable. More and more people got interested. And I remember one day, summer 1988, I was in my garden and this guy hopped over the fence. It turned out he was a Gardener's Well producer. And that ended with Jeff Hamilton coming. And we got on really well.
Charles, the crops are looking really good. What fertiliser are you using on them?
I'm not using any, Jeff. It's good soil and we're putting on quite heavy dressings of manure and compost, and that's enough.
No chemicals at all?
No.
Well, that is really quite remarkable.
What he was concentrating on was organic, because even in 1988, organic was still very new. And talking with Jeff, you know, I realised it could become quite mainstream.
The compost, and this is your mushroom compost again, that just spreads over the top, does it?
Just sprinkled on top.
How's that? I'm not a dab hand at this job, but...
No, that's fine. That's the idea anyway.
After that, he really promoted it, and he was catalyst, I think, for making organic gardening very acceptable. Starting out depends what you've got, particularly in the way of weeds. I would say on the whole, if you've got a lot of weeds, actually, that's not a bad sign. You know, weeds don't grow on barren soil or in poor conditions. It's really straightforward to begin. You can just make a bed on the weeds, the grass, whatever it might be that you have, put down a frame and fill it with compost. And the compost you use will exclude the light from the weeds. And so you haven't got to worry about removing turf or scarifying the ground in any way, removing anything that's there. I like to keep the finest compost I have for the surface layer. And that means I've got a good surface for sowing and planting. And it's ideal, really, if it's a little bit dry. In my case, I'm using mushroom compost. Bought compost from the supermarket in big bags would be suitable as well. And you can sow and plant into that straight away. So that gives you a lovely sense of completion. You know, it's a one afternoon project, if you like. I think a lot of gardeners have got a great curiosity and are a bit frustrated by being given always a set of rules. So I'm always saying, you know, try different things. And no-dig is different in so many ways, and it opens up so many possibilities. So there's a bit of game-changing going on, and I'm really happy to be part of it.
Hey, fascinating. Really was. Charles, the only problem I've got with no-dig is that if I'm really fed up, I love digging. But that said, I've watched that, and I think next year, I'm with you. I'm going to experiment, and I'm going to turn this area into a no-dig garden. But that's next year. At the moment, I'm just taking out the broad beans, which are finished. We've had some decent feeds off them. Some of them are a bit mixed, really, in reality. But time now to sort of put the next crop in. And I suppose one of the things to chat about at the moment is crop rotation. I think so if you're, you know, starting gardening, first thing I would say about crop rotation is try not to get too hung up on it. You know, I use it as a guide, and in reality, what you're looking to do really is not put the same crop in that same piece of ground. That's the simplest way to explain it. Why do we use crop rotation? Really, it's because if you do start putting the same thing in the ground year after year, you know, and there's a problem and a disease, that will be in the ground and that will start affecting your crops big time. But also the beneficial part of doing crop rotation is that actually you can leave certain nutrients, you know, supplied by one crop will help another crop. So I am going to prep this, and I'm going to put leeks in here. And they tend to be quite hungry. And I'm just going to get some manure and work that in. And say this is just horse manure, but any good organic matter that you could work into the soil. So while I finish off this soil, we're off to see another one of your home videos, which I am really loving. We're going to meet Becky Taylor, and she's come up with a nifty idea how to tie in your tomatoes. Jeff Hamilton would have been incredibly proud of her.
Hello, and welcome to our greenhouse. Now, I'm sure, like everybody, you've got to the point where your tomatoes are growing a bit tall and you're wanting to tie them onto the stakes. I'm going to show you a cheap way of doing that. take an old pair of tights, cut the leg, and cut off a nice evenly widthed piece of leg. When you've done that, you pull it out and stretch it a bit, double it over, and then you've also got, from the garden, anywhere really, a stick. You just need to make a little stick about so long, and that's all you need. And now I'm going to tie this in up here, going first of all round the plant, threading it through the loop behind. That makes a nice little bit of padding against the stick. And then through it again on the other side. Then take your little toggle and thread that through the little bit that's looped. Twist it twice, and there you have it. Now the nice thing about this is if at some stage you decide, well actually, do you know what, that doesn't need to be there anymore and I could do with tying up my sweet peas, you can just take it off, take it to your sweet peas and tie up your sweet peas. And that's it.
Becky, I think that's a wonderful idea, I really do. Mind you, I'm not sure I'm going to risk going in Mrs. Frost's drawers to take out her tights and stockings. I think that could get me in an awful lot of bother. Anyway, leeks. There's different ways of growing leeks, so what I want to try and do is demo just a couple of different ways. And so first of all, I'm just going to dig a shallow trench. And when I say a shallow trench, it's probably about 50 mil deep. The variety I've gone for is called Neptune. They're a good, reliable leek, you know, resistant apparently to rust, which is one of the problems that leeks can suffer from. But what I've got here is some leeks that, actually I sowed them quite late, if I'm honest with you. So what you're really looking for is you're looking for a leek that's probably about pencil thickness. These are quite slim pencils, but they'll be all right. So I'm just going to trim the roots, yeah? And the reason I'm doing that is it makes it easier to drop in the hole, but also at the same time, once this gets going, that'll really stimulate that to put on new root and fix it down into the ground. But I'm also going to tidy up the tops. I'm going to do that, same reason really. What that will do is it will stimulate more growth. The next thing really is just to drop it simply in the hole. It will fall really nicely, and that's all you do. You see that, Ash? You just drop it in the hole. It's really easy. Hey? Gardening with cats. It's feeling a little bit more like Blue Peter at the moment than Garden as well, but there we go. I'm using a dibber to create holes about 15 centimetres deep and 15 centimetres apart. You could also use the end of a broom. I also grew some leeks in root trainers. If you didn't get round to sowing any yourself in spring, you might still be able to buy some as young plants in plugs. With these, you just need to pop them in and backfill. Take care not to get any soil in the top of the leek. Nobody likes a gritty leek. All right, so that's those planted in. And then we've got one more job to do. So, this is the bit I think, as a gardener, makes you feel slightly uncomfortable. Where I drop those leeks into the holes, I'm not going to fill them back in. All I'm going to do is water into each hole. And that will settle that soil in around those roots. And then over the coming weeks, the soil will just fall back into the hole. You come to the other leeks, and I'm just going to water them as normal. And then what I'll do, as these start to grow, is I'll actually earth up. So where I've dug those trenches, as the leek starts to mature, I'll keep just pulling that soil back in, and what that will do is it will just keep blanching, you know, the stem of the leek. So, you know, you get your lovely long white stems on your leeks by actually covering up the leek and not letting the light in. You know, you really have that beautiful white stem that you can enjoy for your Christmas dinner. So now we've got another one of those wonderful home videos, and this one's from Khalid from Edenbridge in Kent, and he's showing us how he's growing strawberries in his garden.
Hello guys, I want to share my strawberry wall with you today. Everything you see here is all recycled. The bricks, the decking boards, the pots, somebody was chucking them away. I've got 65 plants. The variety that I've got here today is Cupid, as you can see. I don't encourage any runners because I've got enough stock to last me for the next at least 2 years before I can change my stock again. I water my plants every other day, and once a week I feed them with comfrey tea. As you can see, they're doing very well. I've got some very big strawberries, and as you can see, it doesn't take any space at all. I hope you guys would be inspired by what I've got here, and thank you for watching.
Clede, I think you are growing enough strawberries for the whole street, my friend. But I thought the way that you're covering the wall was absolutely brilliant. I'm just picking a few strawberries, even though it is starting to rain. These are called Florence, and they're a late variety, but they taste beautiful. This is a job that I love because when you're picking, it's one for the pot and then one for you, isn't it? Anyway, this is a job that I love, but here's a few for you for the weekend, if you fancy it. Roses can put on a lot of growth over the summer. And if you're training one against a wall or a fence, it's worth tying in at regular intervals. But rather than tie them in any old how, it's best to fan the stems out as horizontally as you can to encourage more flowers. If you haven't got round to sowing any kale yet, it's not too late. It's easy to grow and could give you a fresh supply of leaves right through to the spring. I like to start mine off in modules filled with peat-free compost. The seeds are easy to handle. I tend to sprinkle a few at a time in each compartment. Cover with compost, then gently water. There's no need to provide any heat. Germination takes a matter of days. July is a month to give a well-established wisteria a summer haircut. This will help keep it under control and, with any luck, produce a better display of flowers next year. Take each piece of whippy young growth and, starting from the old wood, count out to 7 buds before making a snip. Take your time if you're dealing with a mature plant. You may need to get the ladders out. So, we've had sun, we've had wind, and now we've got rain. But there's something glorious about that summer rain. I love the way that it sits on leaves, drips off grasses, it just sort of lightly covers flowers. And obviously, I love getting mucky. I've had a few letters about the knees and my jeans. Don't worry, it comes out. Anyway, I've had a lovely time, so thank you for spending some time with me. Hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Monty will be back next week at Longmeadow at 8 o'clock. In the meantime, look after yourselves. See you soon.